皆さん、こんにちは。ロケーションウィークリージャパン、特別会ということで、今日はゲストに、LBMA グローバルの、創始者というか、プレジデントである、アシーフ・カーンに来てもらっています。Asif, thank you for coming on to this show.
Yes, thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
So, you are in Japan.
Yes.
Do you come to Japan often or?
Once or twice a year.
That's often enough.
Yes.
So we have this podcast show, which is the called Location Weekly Japan. We obviously took this off of your own, podcasting program, Location Weekly. What do you talk about in the Location Weekly?
Yeah. So every week we try to have a show that kind of looks around the world and sees how different members and different companies are using location data or technology, or what kind of innovation is happening in the space. So just sharing some of the key stories that we saw from the week before.
Okay. Yeah, it's one of the my favorite show after all the sporting baseball shows and all. Anyway, so it is a really nice show. I encourage everybody to listen to this as well. You'll be able to see what's happening in the world of the locations as well. But anyway, so you're the guy who started this whole LBMA thing, right? So I discussed. I mean, at my previous podcast, I explained how I started the location LBMA Japan, right? But that's you started this back in 2010?
End of 2009.
Oh, okay. So how did it come about?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. So previous to the LBMA, I was running a startup in the Wi-Fi analytics space. So okay. I was putting free Wi-Fi into restaurant chains like McDonald's in Canada. And so the consumer would come in and they would get free Wi-Fi, but they have to watch some location-based advertising.
On what?
On their laptop or
on their laptop.
Yes.
Right. And there was no iPhone back then.
There was no iPhone.
Right.
So it was their early laptops. And so they would be able to come in and get free Wi-Fi because at that time, most of the Wi-Fi you had to pay for it in those days.
Right.
So they would get free Wi-Fi, but they, in exchange for the free, they have to watch a advertising that is location based. So it's local to the area from some other businesses or this kind of thing. So we built this network. And then I sold the business in 2009. And what I saw at that time, because I was working very early in the location space.
Right.
But around the same time in 2009, we had the creation of a few companies. So Foursquare was launched in 2009.
Right.
Foursquare had a competitor also launched a few months later called Koala. You had another company out of Boston called Weir, which eBay eventually bought later on, PayPal. So you could see in this kind of late 2009 that there was all of a sudden these new companies coming, trying to figure out about location data.
Right.
And I had just sold my company and I was like, oh, this is an interesting industry that's coming. I want to be involved in that. But when you sell a company, you have to, there's some legal issues around non-competes and staying out of the, the industry and so on. So I didn't want to follow the rules.
Right.
So I said, oh, what can I do to stay in the location space? And so I decided, okay, let me launch the LBMA because it's not for profit.
Right.
And it doesn't violate the competitive rules of, selling a for-profit company in the space. So that was the reason originally, because I saw this new industry coming. I wanted to be involved, but I didn't have the ability to work in the commercial side. So I launched a nonprofit organization.
Okay. But that's not going to give you any, profit, isn't it?
No, it was something that I felt that there was going to be many more companies coming, like Foursquare and these kind of companies. And, I wanted to be at the center of kind of bringing the industry together and helping the industry start to find a way to promote and, sell their services to the advertising industry, to the brands, to the, the corporate world. And so that was kind of the mission of the LBMA. And originally, we started only in Canada. And very quickly, we had some events. And it was also very early days for Twitter. And so we were promoting the events on Twitter. And some other people who were on Twitter in New York and Chicago and other markets saw what we were doing. And I started getting calls saying, hey, can we have the LBMA in New York? Can we have the LBMA here and there? And so very quickly, we had to expand outside of just Canada and into the US. And then, it just kept growing and growing from there.
So I can see how things are, moving fast back in those days.
Yeah.
iPhones would have come in back in 2009, 2010, sometime around there, right?
Yeah, late 10, I think.
Yeah. So industry, well, I don't know if you can call it an industry by then, but things are moving fast. But now the regulations and laws would come in, towards the mid 2010s, right? 2015, 16.
Yes,
right?
yes.
So what has, become an issue with LBMA, or how did you?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we were able to do, as the laws were changing and the privacy issues became clear, governments started to look at this. And the companies started to look at this as well. So a good example, from North America in particular was Goala, who I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
They grew very fast. They were kind of running quite neck and neck with Foursquare for users, millions of users. But then they decided to sell the company to Facebook. And one of the interesting things about that was the reaction from the user community of Goala, because they loved Goala. They were happy to be Goala users. They were happy to share their data with Goala.
Yeah.
But the minute that Facebook became the owner now of that data, that everything changed. Because then they were, we don't want Facebook to have our data. And none of these location companies at that time had thought about, data ownership, data residency, how to return the data back to the consumer if they don't want you to have it. None of these things had been discussed. And this became kind of the launch for some of the privacy rules that we now have today.
Oh, so this all started when Facebook bought Goala.
Yeah, it was one of the triggers for.
Yeah, we all saw all the news of the Facebook being accused by the governments and all that. So I see. Wow.
Yeah. So this was one of the reasons, right? And then since then, obviously, now we have GDPR rules in Europe, and we have rules here in Japan, and now they're drafting new rules for US as well. To be similar to GDPR. So I think it's changing. I think it's, in some ways it's getting more difficult to collect location data. In other ways, I think it's getting clearer on how to operate and, how to, if you're a company in this space, how to start to think about business models and making money and where you can do that.
Right. So speaking about the business model, you've been doing this LBMA for 13 years now, right?
Yeah.
Regulations have been changing and all that. What about the business model itself? What do you have seen within this 13 years? What has changed and what has evolved and all?
So I think in the early days, we saw a lot of companies launching and kind of following the typical sort of app launch kind of parameters, let's just acquire users. We don't care about making money. but if we have a lot of users, eventually we can make money.
Right.
That was kind of the early days.
That was always the not just the location.
Apps and in social media,
right.
all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I think it was the same in location. And then it became, okay, now we have lots of users. What kind of, sort of personalized, hyper-local ad targeting can we do? Let's one-to-one messaging, offers, coupons, these kinds of things. And that was, for many companies, they made some good money from that, working with the big advertising agencies and the brands. And then when the privacy rules tightened up, and there was a fair bit of pushback from the consumer population, a lot of that has stopped now. And what's kind of where we are today is you have now more of companies working to build audience profiles or personas or segments based on people's movements, but you're not targeting one person.
Right.
You're targeting a group of people who follow the same behavior.
Sure.
And this has become kind of where the industry is today. And I think we're going to be there now for another few years at least in that space. And I think so you have companies now that are selling location data.
Right.
You have companies that are buying the location data and creating insights and analytics from that data. And then you have kind of the brands and the agencies who are then trying to provide to their clients some sort of marketing spend and optimization based on that data.
Right.
So those are kind of the three things you see right now today in the space.
Interesting. Yeah. So the location data businesses that we promote here in Japan, it has traditionally been, advertisement industry that was actually making money, but some other, analytics or the, uses for the connectivity or Mars, the mobility services and all that hasn't really been generating revenues. That's been an issue here. Then the next big thing that's coming is the smart city, super city. And in order for the smart city to function well enough, they need to have the data, right? Without any sort of data, the smart city is not smart enough.
Yes.
But people are struggling or trying to figure out what how to make money off of it. Any thoughts or anybody who's making good money off of new things?
I think a couple of thoughts. So I think one, you have kind of people taking location data right now and kind of doing a lot of modeling and predictive modeling and analytics on city growth and populations and migration patterns and these kinds of things.
Right.
You have companies now, new companies emerging in North America, at least, where they are creating kind of virtual replicas of the physical population and modeling based on that.
Right.
So that's very interesting right now because it kind of is sort of leading into metaverse applications or digital twins.
Right.
So recently I was at the Geospatial World Forum last week. And one of the big things that all the governments who were there, it's mostly governments who were there talking about creating digital twins of their cities,
right.
And using those digital twins for, analytical modeling predictions from everything from disaster management,
right.
Earthquakes, floods, these kinds of things to, how to build cities, where to build cities, where to build parks, where to, urban planning.
Right.
So I think there are a lot of interesting applications emerging around that, and using digital twins, I think, is going to be one of the big sort of plays there for people.
I mean, that's for the business model is for the local governments to pay
Yeah, they
things,
pay
right?
for it. Yeah.
Yeah. We do have the kind of models, and always there's good amount of subsidies for the initial phase of the implementing new society changing technologies like this. But we need to have a sustainable business, right? In order for such modeling and all that to keep going.
Yeah.
Subsidies will subside
for sure.
in a 3 years, 5 years time frame. So I think one of the issues that we need to deal with is to find the sustainable business model that doesn't require subsidies. I know you wouldn't have the answer right at this moment. If you do, you wouldn't be sitting here.
Yeah.
Any thoughts going forward?
Yeah, so I think that there's a couple of things, right? So there's subsidies for these kinds of initiatives right now from governments around the world.
Yeah.
I think the other area where we're seeing big growth again, where maybe we saw, I would say in 2014, 15, and then it kind of slowed down, is in the indoor hardware-based navigation and analytics space. And this is also playing big now into the smart cities.
Right.
So I think these hardware-based, sensor-based IoT type of platforms where you can pull location data from that, I think is a sustainable business for many people right now. And, I think we're seeing a lot of investments in that, both hardware and software-based, kind of beacons and these kinds of things. So it's interesting because, again, kind of similar to the personalized messaging a few years ago, there was a big push around beacon deployments and networks, and then it kind of stopped.
Right.
Because the use case was around personalization and things. And now the use case is very different. Now it's about people movements and visitations and, understanding the city flows and these kinds of things, and some wayfinding and navigation as well. But yeah, I think it's pretty interesting. And I think there is a model there.
Okay. Let's hope something tangible will come out of there as well. Okay, so we are closing out this session. It's been fun, but let's have you talk about your own company, if you will.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I also have a startup called Ground Level Insights.
Ground Level Insight.
Ground Level Insight.
Okay.
Yeah. So we are based in Toronto, and we are providing location analytics to the North American market.
Sure.
So what that means is we work with retailers and restaurant chains and sports teams primarily to just help them understand who's coming to their stores or their stadiums, where they're coming from, how far they're traveling to get there. And this is helping them to understand where to buy advertising, where to focus their advertising spend. In the case of sports, we're also using this to measure the return on investment for sponsorship sales within the stadiums, these kinds of things. So it's kind of interesting, and now we're starting to explore new partnerships with companies here in Japan and all over the world on bringing more data into the platform, bringing other sensor networks into the platform, and we are seeking partners who have data that can enrich what we're doing.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
All right. Any last words, thoughts to all the listeners to this show?
Just to say that it's a pleasure to be part of the LBMA and from day one, and to have you here leading the Japanese efforts. So thank you so much for that. Thanks to all of our members here in the LBMA Japan. We're really glad that you're all part of that. And I look forward to being back in October for the CTEC and hopefully seeing all of you in person.
Okay, thank you very much for coming on to the show.
Thank you. All right.